Welcome back to Block TV. It's time for Bird Talk, in which we talk crypto Twitter with Pierre Rochard, one of Bitcoin's fiercest advocates who has been writing and advising about the cryptosphere since 2013. Every week, Pierre shares his insights on his favorite and least favorite tweets of the week and break down his reasons for his choices. Pierre, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Favorite time of the week.
All right, well, tell us. Let's jump right into it. What you want to start with? Your favorite or your least favorite tweet?
Let's start with the favorite.
There we go. Take it away.
All right, so we've seen emerge in Bitcoin particular sayings, and Willem here put together an excellent list of them. So the first one actually predates Bitcoin. It's trusted third parties are security holes. And this was written by Nick Szabo in one of his papers. And essentially the argument is that if you have to have a third party involved, it's kind of like when you have to keep a secret with someone else. If there's more than one person who has a secret, the odds of it getting out increase exponentially, right? And we've seen that be the case with Bitcoin, especially with private keys, where if someone else has your private keys and you have to trust them with your private keys, then odds are you might not see your Bitcoin again. So I like trusted third parties of security holes. So the next thing is, well, tweets again. Not your keys, not your Bitcoins. So that directly flows from trusted third parties or security holes. And not your keys, not your Bitcoins, I think really came to the fore with the hack of the exchange Mt. Gox in Japan, where it became apparent that if you're not holding maybe a hardware wallet or a paper wallet or even your own hot wallet, then you're relying on somebody else's security, somebody else's competence, and that's not always a great gamble, especially as we saw with Mt. Gox now. Perhaps custodians have improved since then, and they've learned their lessons from that. But I still think that a Bitcoiner who is trying to be responsible should be trying to hold their own keys and learning about security so that they're not creating centralized honeypots that attract hackers and insiders to take funds from.
Mm-hmm. And what's that, can't be evil?
Can't be evil is from Adam Back, and the argument there is that if we design a system to be decentralized and to have the right incentives, then we can make it such that not only is it not, like Google says, don't be evil. And so that means that they have the choice to be evil or not. Adam Back here is saying, let's build systems where there's no choice about being evil or not. Now, the next one has been attributed to me, Bitcoin is for enemies. I did not come up with it. And if someone came up with it, it's Taj, who is one of the Lightning co-creators. And there, to me, it's about Bitcoin being a neutral money. And Bitcoin, because it's permissionless and decentralized and global, anyone can get onto the Bitcoin network, broadcast transactions pseudonymously, create a Bitcoin wallet just by getting random numbers and letters together. So that means that you're going to have people on the Bitcoin network who are enemies. Now, obviously, we also have lots of friends on the Bitcoin network, but that is an important statement that comes out because we've seen other payment systems get highly politicized. And so the United States, for example, uses its dollar dominance to punish foreign countries by using regulations and limitations on capital controls. And we've seen that with Iran, for example. Now, we can debate about whether Iran is an enemy or not, but it's kind of besides the point because we want to create a system where it's neutral and open access.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, especially when you're dealing with money, and you know, we've noted here on the show that sanctions are one of the strongest, in money capital control, one of the strongest weapons that America and the U.S. has against the world, especially if they don't want to go to military action. It saves a lot of lives, having that ability to use economic action. And like you said, it's up for debate whether U.S. should have that control, and if we want to promote Bitcoin is decentralized. What's your views on world powers that we so-called are friends with losing that control?
So I actually think it's debatable whether those controls are effective or not. So we've had sanctions on Cuba for decades, and they are still a authoritarian dictatorship that is communist. So I don't think that it's necessarily even effective from the point of view of America achieving its strategic goals. And so I think that maybe rethinking that hypothesis of, hey, if we punish the foreign population, because what ends up happening is that the dictator says, look, America is the enemy. And it rallies the people behind the dictator by showing that, hey, they are attacking us with these economic sanctions. We didn't do anything. And so it puts them in a position of being a victim rather than the dictator being in a position of essentially being a perpetrator of evil criminal acts against their own population.
Mm-hmm. Wow, good insight. Well, I mean, that just brings us to our next one, which is don't trust, verify by unknown cyberpunk.
So don't trust, verify is very important because it's all about running a full node, running a Bitcoin node, so that you can verify yourself without having to trust anyone else that the payments that people are sending you are being included, are part of a real Bitcoin transaction and are being included in a valid Bitcoin block. And without running a full node, you inevitably have to trust someone else. You have to trust someone else's full node that they are telling you the truth and that they are giving you correct information. And even worse, you might have to give away your privacy doing that. So don't trust, verify also is about the Bitcoin monetary policy. If someone tells you there's only 18 million Bitcoin, you actually have the ability to use your laptop or desktop computer to sync the Bitcoin blockchain and to come to your own determination as to how many Bitcoin there are in circulation, which is simply not the case for some of the other cryptocurrencies that are listed out there. And it is certainly not the case for government fiat currencies. There, you absolutely have to trust the Federal Reserve or whatever central bank and trust that the data that they are providing you about their monetary policy is correct.
Mm-hmm. So it's not only the decentralization of actual money and value, but also the decentralization of knowledge and data as well, where everyone has the ability to kind of confirm, make sure that everything is as they say it is. That's why the big word here for blockchain is transparency. It will allow for transparency, not just to trust people, but also see behind the curtain, if you would.
Right, and that's all enabled because of the cryptography, which is that we have functions where it's very easy to create a hash of a block, and then it's very easy to verify that that hash is correct. And without cryptography, this would be extremely difficult to implement ourselves. So we're very lucky to have cryptography.
Mm-hmm, right, and that's it. Like, many over the years and over the millennia of humankind, technology has always pushed us forwards. Blockchain might be that next technology that builds upon cryptography to take us to the next step. That brings us to our next one, unforgeable costliness?
So I'd have to go back and check on this one. I think that it's a reference to the Bitcoin mining, and that we know how much energy or how much hash rate has gone into past creation of Bitcoin. And that essentially means that nobody created Bitcoin out of thin air, as is often accused of doing. To really create something out of thin air and to get what's called seigniorage revenue, you have to be the issuer of a currency who has a monopoly. Now, issuers of currency in Bitcoin, the miners, don't have a monopoly. In fact, it is an extremely competitive industry of global industry of people trying to find the least expensive electricity. And so it causes massive margin compression. and does not allow for profits that are extraordinary in the sense of, hey, when the dollar gets printed, it costs them a penny to print a dollar, and it's worth $100, the dollar bill. So that kind of highlights the difference between Bitcoin and other currencies, and including other currencies like Ripple, for example, where it doesn't cost anything for the Ripple Corporation to issue more XRP. They just have a giant treasury stock of it. And that is, to me, about the same as seigniorage in fiat currencies.
So you're saying because it takes value to actually make a Bitcoin, therefore it gives it also an inherent value in itself?
I wouldn't go so far as to say that, because then it kind of becomes a circular argument of where the value is coming from. But what I would argue is that unforgeable costliness is a signal that this is not some kind of play money that people can get for free. To acquire Bitcoin, you're going to have to either trade for it by providing value, or mine it by burning electricity. And so there are no free Bitcoin coming down from the heavens.
Mm-hmm. So it gives actual weight to the supply side of the supply demand equation here, whereas XRP, or even the U.S. government dollar, they could kind of print that, make that whenever they want, manipulate the supply. With Bitcoin, because the supply is fixed both in the limit amount as well as how often it's made and how much is made, that does give stability to the supply side of that equation.
That's right.
Interesting.
That's right.
I've never heard that before. Unforgeable costliness. I like that one. But
Nick Stava, he's a genius. Go read all of his material on the NakamotoInstitute.org.
All right, we got to get him on the show. And okay, and let's throw right back. Those were your favorite tweets. Now let's take the flip side. What were your least favorite tweets?
So my least favorite tweet was about the Attorney General of the United States. So kind of the head lawyer was arguing that tech companies need to cooperate with the government to provide access to encrypted user messages. And this is a huge problem from both a civil rights perspective and from an engineering perspective. From a civil rights perspective, here in the United States, we have limitations on what the government can do. So we have, for example, the First Amendment, which tries to protect free speech. We have the Second Amendment, which is more controversial, about protecting the right to bear arms and to own weapons. And there are a number of other amendments. The fourth is about search and seizure. So the government has to get a search warrant from a judge and show there's probable cause for why they are digging into your affairs. And then the Fifth Amendment about not self-incriminating. And so that means that you don't have to divulge information, you personally, that would cause you to incriminate yourself. And I think that all of these civil rights that the founding fathers of the United States put in the Constitution and the amendments to the Constitution, they were based on a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience and a lot of history. And what Attorney General Barr is trying to do here is undo that. And he's trying to undermine those rights by saying that we have to have a form of encryption that the government has access to. And so that's why I found this tweet to be so upsetting personally. But the other part is the engineering part is very complicated. Of how do we make it so that there is a backdoor that only the government can access? Because otherwise, if anyone can access it, then what's the point of encryption? Then your neighbor or the North Korean government or Russia can access your encrypted messages. So I actually think that from an engineering perspective, it's unworkable. in the sense that you would have to have it so that the federal government is the unique holder of a private key that is a kind of a master key that allows you to unlock any kind of device. Now, as we were discussing, trusted third parties are security holes. And so here you're introducing a trusted third party, and you're not introducing any kind of trusted third party. You're introducing a trusted third party which has a history, a long history of sometimes failing to not only defend its own citizens, but also of defending data. And so we saw that with Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning, that the US government is not particularly competent when it comes to keeping secrets. And so are we really supposed to trust them to keep some kind of master key that will allow anyone, including foreign governments, to access all of our encrypted data? I think that on so many levels it's egregious and unworkable, and that Attorney General Barr should really reconsider his position and learn that strong cryptography is one of the most important technologies that secures not only American kind of cyberspace, but also just American values, and frankly, what I think should be global values about human rights.
I think you're exactly right. I think that putting this kind of power in the hands of this key in the hands of the government is a recipe for disaster. Either because they overuse it and infringe on individuals and citizens' rights, or on the other side where they're not careful enough, and a bad actor gets a hold of that as well. I mean, there's been a lot of pressure lately from both sides of the political aisle on big tech, whether it's coming from, we see a lot of those Democratic, presidential potential nominees and delegates who are, kind of running on this platform of, we gotta break up big tech, we gotta depower them, and then you got, at least on the Republican side, and Attorney General Barr himself, who's trying to say, no, give us the power as well, give us the key. So it's interesting to see, how big tech will react. But it is really great. It's a great feeling to know that Bitcoin is totally decentralized, and no matter what happens here, there's nothing that the U.S. government could do to affect the infrastructure of the Bitcoin network. They could, of course, attack users of Bitcoin and both traders and platforms, but the infrastructure is safe, and I think that's key here.
Yeah, agreed. And we saw actually yesterday that GitHub, which is a website that hosts a lot of open source software, was subjected to some of the trade sanctions against Iran. And so Iranian users of GitHub were getting removed from GitHub and banned. And I think that this highlights kind of a troubling trend, but it also shows that we need to work on decentralizing other parts of infrastructure other than just Bitcoin itself. And so Bitcoin actually relies on GitHub for development work, and perhaps it's time to find other solutions for the open source ecosystem that would make it more censorship resistant than American corporations. And I think that this is true also of just instant message chat apps. If the federal government makes it so that all American corporations have to have this back door, then what we'll see is that others who are open source and not based in the United States will gain traction because there's nothing the government can do about people using their software.
And that, of course, could have, rippling effects, if everyone switches over to these things and, there are nefarious actors behind them, or, they could be pressured by other governments, that definitely could lead down a bad road. Well, Pierre, let's hope that, the good tweets stay true. Let's hope that maybe Attorney General Barr checks out your favorite tweets, learns some of those things, not your keys, not your crypto. Third-party trust parties are security holes. Thank you so much, Pierre, for joining us. And for all our viewers at home, I'm Yonah Hackhauser. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter